So one of the easiest ways to make your VO3 videos look sharper without spending extra Google Flow credits is to upscale them inside of Adobe After Effects. So instead of generating your videos directly in 4K, which can use significantly more credits, you can generate them at a lower resolution and then use the detail preserving upscale effect to increase the resolution while maintaining as much detail as possible. So before we apply any effects, the first thing I want to point out is the importance of matching the frame rate. So when I'll show you in After Effects when we create the new 4K composition, you want to make sure that the frame rates match exactly to your original video. And I'll show you where you can find that in Adobe After Effects. So if your VO3 video was generated at 24 frames per second, then you would create a composition at 24 frames per second. So let me go ahead and show you. As you can see, I have Adobe After Effects open. If you're new to After Effects, this is pretty easy to follow along. I currently have under Window Workspaces the default settings. So this is pretty much the most common layout that you will see in After Effects. So the first thing we need to do is add our footage, which would be in the project panel. So the way that I imported the footage, I simply just drag my footage into the project panel here. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can double click and then find your file located on your computer and import it that way, or you can simply go to File, Import, find your file, and import it into the project panel. The next step is to create a new composition. And actually, before we do that, go ahead and click on your footage that's in the project panel, and this is where you can find your settings of the original footage, which right here you can see it says 24 frames per second. So that is what we will create our composition at. So I'm just going to rename this detail, and under preset it's going to be custom, and it's going to be the 4K settings, 3840 by 2160, and right here where it says frame rate, we are going to have that at 24 frames per second, which matches our original comp. My duration is going to be 8 seconds because that is what this video is, 8 seconds. So if you have a different clip in your comp, you're going to want to match it to whatever the duration is of your video. So now we are going to drag our footage into our composition that we just created. So you're just going to click on your footage, drag it into the comp, and as you can see, it is much smaller than our comp size. So that's where the effect comes in. So we're going to go over here to Effects and Presets. There's a couple different ways you can search, so I'm just going to type in detail and it pops right up, detail preserving upscale. If you for some reason can't find that, you go to Window, make sure your Effects and Presets are selected. Another way you can do this is just simply make sure that your layer is selected. You go to Effect, and this is located under the Distort tab. And right here you can see Detail Preserving Upscale. So I am going to simply come over here, click on the effect, and drag it into my video layer. So the first setting is the Fit to Comp Width, so I'm just going to go ahead and just click on that, which as you can see, that instantly changed the scale to 200%. So this controls how much the footage is enlarged. Since we're converting it to 4K, it's going to increase it to 200% to completely fill the composition. The next setting is the Reduce Noise. So before the software attempts to sharpen and recreate detail, it analyzes the image for digital noise. Increasing this value smooths out random noise and compression artifacts that could otherwise become more noticeable during the upscale. I'm going to keep it at 0% for this particular video. You know, you want to be careful not to push this setting too high because excessive noise reduction can soften fine textures and make the image appear slightly plastic. So in most cases, it's going to be like a low to moderate value. I'm actually not even going to use that. The next control is detail, which is right here. As you can see, it's currently set at 50%. This is probably the most important setting in the entire effect. Detail tells After Effects how aggressively it should preserve and reconstruct edges and fine textures as the image is enlarged. So the higher values generally create a sharper looking image, but if you push it too far, you might see like ringing around the edges and an artificial looking detail. So I recommend increasing this gradually while viewing your footage at 100% magnification so you can judge the results accurately. So that's just really personal preference on how much you want to increase the detail setting. Another optional effect that you can add is the sharpen effect. So just Under effects and presets, you can type in sharpen and drag that into your comp, and you can increase this to 15 or 20, and I would just use this very conservatively just to restore some crisp edges. And again, that's optional, and you can zoom in to really kind of see how it's going to affect the composition. So yeah, the sharpen, you definitely don't want to increase too much. So finally, if you are happy with your results, we're going to export this out, and then just go ahead and go to File, Export, add to Adobe Media Encoder. You want to make sure that match source high bitrate is selected, and I just always use the H.264 setting. And just keep in mind that this process will magically create detail that doesn't exist in the original footage. So what it does is intelligently preserve edges, reduce scaling artifacts, and produce a cleaner, sharper 4K image. So for most VO3 videos, it's an excellent way to achieve a high quality 4K result, while saving a considerable amount of Google Flow credits. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.